Well, hey everybody, welcome back to Javette Knots. I'm John. I am at a marina in Deltaville, Virginia, down right close to Stingray Point. I think this is Jackson Creek. I can't remember. But this is the next episode of We're Not Talking, featuring a conversation with Jamie White, master rigger. So if you've ever seen a tall ship and you're wondering to yourself, wonder who knows how to do the rigging on those things? Has to be kind of complex and really old school rigging tech, and it is. Jamie's a master rigger, and he has worked on a variety of well-known tall ships, and he has an interesting story. So I had a really good time talking to Jamie, getting to know him a bit over several hours. So I'm breaking this one into two sections. So I hope you enjoy it.
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille.
Okay, exactly. Perfect. Did you make that little chest? That seaman's chest?
Yes, these are my first chest buckets I ever made.
Sweet.
Now, there's a funny story I'll tell you about this with Kit Africa, who's the son of Spike Africa, who was the president of the Pacific Ocean. And there's a story behind that.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, see, now, I'll tell you this. So my buddy Todd, who I've known for years from church when I used to live over in West Point, he is a professional woodworker. He had a cabinet shop in Charlottesville, Virginia for years, sold that, moved back home, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he called me up, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago and said, I want to start tying knots. And I was like, all right, come on by and I'll give you a spool of line. But I had a spool of line that I'm not going to use, so I just gave that to him and said, he just bought an Ashley, so go at it. Then he tried one of the hard sennets from Ashley's before he got that line from me, and he sent me a picture of it. It was like this noodly looking line with a bunch of, I don't know, it was like baling twine or something. I was like, you are not going to have success with that. So that's why I gave him the spool of line. So I said, now try it, and don't try the hard one first. Do something simple.
Exactly.
Don't frustrate
plate,
yourself. Yeah.
Don't try Russian Senate right out of the box.
People are going to want to know how the Bikini King became the square rigger.
You mean this guy?
Yeah. Basically, my understanding is that you probably did an extremely beneficial thing, arguable, for the bikinis of the 1960s, so that the beaches of California were safer than they would have been by putting stop knots.
That's right. Well, besides bikinis, we also manufactured all of the Los Angeles County and several other cities in Southern California. Their lifeguard trunks, swim trunks. Oh. Yeah, so that was pretty good. It got me. It got me a place in junior lifeguards. It's kind of a shoe-in with that. So, so it wasn't only bikini. See, also we manufactured. Well, saying we, it was my dad's company. I ran one of his factories. I had about 25, 30 employees, and we were making 4,000 or 5,000 swimsuits a week. I think overall he had six or so factories, and he was making between 15, 18,000 suits a week. But one of the things we did was the Ocean Pacific corduroy shorts. Do you remember those in the 70s?
Absolutely. They were standard issue.
I probably did the embroidery on the pair that you had. We did, really? I think probably about 90% of the OP men's corduroy shorts. So, because in the winter is when you're doing the women's swimwear, because that was the main emphasis. So come around March, April, then he shifted to men's swimwear, which it never changes.
Right. It's pretty much the same today.
Yeah, and so he met Jim Jinks, who went to high school with Hobie Alter of Hobie Cat fame.
All right.
Yeah. They both grew up down in Oceanside, Southern California, that area. And he got involved with making all the Ocean OP stuff.
Cool.
So that was a lot of fun. He also did, he dabbled in wetsuits for O'Neill.
Really?
Yeah, you know, because when he wasn't produced, he didn't want to lay employees off, so we were just finding anything at all to do. He even made, you know, some of the clothing for Cabbage Patch Dolls. But the true heartbreak, is he had the clothing concession for the Batman TV show, the Batman character. Remember in the 60s, you know, you had Batman and Robin and boom, pow, zap. Yeah, exactly. So he lost his shirt on it because it was kind of a campy deal, but he kept renewing the license. I think it was every 10 or 12 years he had to renew the license. And when the Batman movie came out, I said, Dad, please tell me you still have the merchandising and the clothing. And he went, no, he let it lapse. I mean, but there you go. You know? Yeah. So bikinis have been very good, but that's how I got started, was tying the overhand knot on the end of a bikini. They call it spaghetti, you know, the straps, both the tie in the back and occasionally on the bottoms, there'll be some bikini straps. And I got a penny per knot. So I would ride my bicycle home after school, you know, like in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And I would tie 1,000, 2,000 knots and, you know, make a couple of bucks. It was better than, you know, babysitting or a paper route. So you know, sit in front of the TV and watch The Rifleman and see what old, you know, Lucas McCain is up to, and Micah Lawrence, the old sheriff, you know, what mischief they're going to get up to. So it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
And that's how it started. So
that's a long distance from, you know, climbing the mast of the Balclutha.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Obviously a progression there. And we, you know, now I'm just, for the sake of whatever people want to know, I mean, we talked last night and had a good time chatting. Because I mean,
I'm still recovering from
funny
that,
because I didn't, what was funny is when we first communicated at all, you had contributed $25 to my coffee page, and I was like, oh, "There's Jamie White. Well, I don't know who the hell he is. He sent me $25. I'll send him a hat." So,
and I hope a lot of other people follow my lead. There you go.
So I mean, yeah, that's
well worth.
If you know, if somebody's going to send me $25, I'm going to send them a hat. The hat's cost me a couple bucks, you know. So and it's you know, creating goodwill. So
I would have it on today, but it's down on my boat.
No worries.
So instead, I'm wearing my beautiful Matthew Turner hat.
Sweet.
Kind of goes with my Waiver Tree shirt. You know, I figure if NASCAR can do all this advertising, why can't we? Right?
Absolutely. I've got brand name T-shirts and my ball caps, coffee mug.
Excellent. I love the logo.
You know, it's funny because I had when I posted that on Facebook, I don't know, a month ago or something. I bought 2 of them. Like, right? You know, I just bought. I thought, I wonder what these would look like. How would they turn out? And so I bought 2 of them. And you know, basically, you buy them like that, and it's like $20 a piece, plus shipping. And a buddy of mine is in promotional products, and I called him up and I said, "What would it cost me to get, you know, say 50 or 75 done?" He goes, "I mean, it's a minimum of 75, and it's like $500." So I'm not doing that yet, you know, because I had a lot of people on Facebook say, "Hey, I'll buy one of those." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna have to dump $500 into selling you one for, you know, $20 or whatever." So maybe one day.
Hey, that'd be great. I enjoy my cap, and it has put a few miles on San Francisco Bay on my little Flicka, little 20-foot sloop that I love sailing. So there you go.
Dude, I saw sometime back, you had posted a picture of your Tahiti catch.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Torreya.
Oh, man. That would be me. I mean, that would be my ultimate boat.
Yeah. She was beautiful, but, you know, it was a wooden boat. She was solid teak, about 1 inch and 5/8 thick,
Really?
1 3/4 thick teak deck, laid deck. She had the forward hatch was off a PT boat. It was this
Really?
aluminum bronze thing that was just beautiful. It was a round hat, not square. So it was very convenient. All the rigging fittings were Monel. Everything
Really?
was Monel.
Really? That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. And
One
the
less
story,
thing.
yeah, the story behind that is the fellow that had her built was a wonderful gentleman named Jim Cotton. And Jim was a young lieutenant in the Navy in the early 60s before Vietnam really heated up.
Yeah.
And he was in the Philippines, on this supply vessel or whatnot. And he had always wanted to build a Tahiti ketch. So he met up with a fellow named Speedy Williams, and old Speedy was the lead shipwright at Higgins Boat in Louisiana that built a lot of the landing craft and PT boats.
Okay.
So they sent him to the Philippines once it was recaptured after MacArthur, recaptured the islands, to start repairing battle damaged PT boats.
Okay.
That's why it has a PT hatch on it. So he built it, and Jim didn't drink or smoke. So when he got his monthly allowance of booze or cigarettes or tobacco or whatever, he would just go down to the machine shop and say, hey, I got a carton of smokes or a case of beer or whatever it may be. And they made up all the fittings for him. It fell off a truck, I guess, right?
The barter economy.
Everything was Monel. Everything. The Kranz iron on the bowsprit, the end of the bowsprit, was not a round collar that had lugs welded on. It was a solid billet of Monel that had been machined. It was just incredible. And I went down to the Alyssa to become director after I served as basically rigging supervisor on Balclutha at the San Francisco Maritime National Historic Park. Now that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
And I thought, do I really want to bring this wooden boat down to Texas and the weather and whatnot? And I said, no, unfortunately, I'm going to have to sell her. I also had gone through a divorce, so I ended up selling her. But she was a beautiful, beautiful boat, and I do miss her. She had a lot of good stories.
I'll bet. It was funny. I was thinking, you're the only person I can think of that if we took you and stuck you in a time machine and went back a couple 100 years, you'd have a usable trade.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't make much money, but
I had a heck of a nice time, and that is a very, very interesting point because with sailing ships and sailboats, etc., most things are done. Everything's hydraulic. Unless on a maxi yacht and some of the new modern stuff that has a flight attendant call button and self-tending winches and this and that. And hey, you don't even have to haul your anchor up. You just push a button, But back 150 years ago, during the era of some of the ships that I've had the pleasure of restoring, I would have been a member of one of the roving gangs or would have done something. I don't think, bikinis were not a big thing back in the 80s. So,
bikini, maybe not.
Not a bit, but I do know how to sew, and that might have come well, working at a sweatshop and the slums of New York or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
but it's a lot of fun.
It's an old school craft, and you can't go to school for it. You had to get in there and just start doing it, right?
Well, yes and no. It's interesting. There are books that were written. For instance, Darcy Lieber, the young officer sheet anchor. There's David Steele wrote a book on elements of mast making and rigging, men wearing. There's several. There are quite a few texts that were available, but when you figure the average sailor maybe had a second or third grade education, a lot of them could not read. Yeah. So when they were lofting out rigging, for instance, they didn't write things down. They would use chalk on the floor, and they would put up several posts, and they would just pass the rigging around the posts, and then they would cut it. And there were certain ratios that they used. A topsail yard was a certain ratio or length of the lower mast, and the beam of the ship corresponded to a lot of other bits of rigging. So you were able to rig a ship without basically knowing how to read. If you could just figure out proportions and, okay, half of this length, you just, chalk it out down on the ground. But it was very much an oral tradition. A lot of the books were written so that, at least in my opinion, and talking to other old timers, so that the officers would not look too foolish in front of the bosun and the crew. So they would know that if you are laying on some service on a piece of cordage, for instance, that you would know how to do that, and you would know if it was being done correctly. And we're still an oral tradition. One of the things that I enjoy most is passing along the skill. Because it's one thing to have the artifact, the waver tree, Balclutha, Cuddy Sark, whatever the vessel may be, but without the human element, the skill. And I know that both Lindsay and Des, who I really enjoyed both of the interviews you did with him and also with Miko and everyone else, have commented on that. It's important we're all part of a continuum, and that we pass along the knowledge. I get most annoyed with people that do not want to do that want to keep it kind of a secret society, so that, then they're going to have to call me and get the answers. That's a surefire way to kill a tradition. It'll just die out. So
I mean, the trade secret thing is very selfish.
Yes,
it's we're in a world where these are things that, indeed, oral tradition or YouTube, whatever, that we need to share it. We're in an obscure subset of the population of people who actively do knot tying, whether it's practical stuff like my buddy Ned says, the kind of knots that keep stuff from falling on your head when you're on a boat, or whether it's fancy work. It's all related, and I think it all. I make a statement in the verbiage on my website that all knots started with a practical purpose of some sort.
Yes,
whether it's on land and sea, and then the bored sailor, he couldn't read or write, and he had some small line, and he showed off a little bit.
Indeed. And then by the style of fancy work, you could tell also was the person on a whale ship on an extended voyage where they went through a lot of line, and it was just recycled. Eventually ended up being baggy wriggle, and after that, who knows? But
right.
These are real important things. Yes,
I completely concur.
And one of the interesting things. Let me go grab something to show you.
Right,
right?
Yeah, grab it. Yeah.
Like, for instance, I've had several people ask me, well, what happened to the tutorials I had on I think it was a photo streaming service. I forget which one it was. I think it was Flickr. And then on YouTube, I had actual videos on splicing wire rope and doing wire piecing.
I looked at them last night.
and I had to take those down if I wanted to do the Kindle thing. So I have a book on Amazon for splicing wire rope.
Riddle and strands. I love that.
And one for Seize the Stay. You got it.
All right.
But in order for Kindle to publish those, I had to take down those videos. So it's unfortunate, but you can get a nice little bit of reading. So it fits. I made it the perfect size so it fit in the head. So you always had something to look at. There you go.
Perfect. So you say, so with Kindle, so you say they're published on Kindle, so you can download them on Kindle, right?
Yeah, you can download them on Kindle.
Was there a Kindle made you make an agreement to pull them off of YouTube?
Well, they won't publish unless you do not have it elsewhere.
Exclusivity.
So, the exclusivity, yeah. So and it's really nice. So now you can have a book with some fairly decent photographs on how to turn in a wire seizing, for instance. So
well, eventually, if I ever get done, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy passing on that skill because, once again, I'm talking about the continuum, and I didn't make up any of this stuff. I have a couple of techniques that I think are my own that I haven't seen anywhere else. But I remember one time I was sailing on the Bounty replica, and I always have to say, not the one that sank.
Yeah.
Gibson Anthony Hopkins version. So I was second mate and sailmaker on her for about 3 years, and sailed, I don't know, 25,000 miles on her or something. Cool. And we were in Sydney alongside the rocks down in old Sydney town, and I was splicing up a piece of wire rope it was some kind of a pennant that we needed for gangway or something, because the ship herself, everything on Bounty, it was incredible. Outside, it was all 18th century. Bligh, if he went aboard, or Christian, they would have been right at home.
Really?
Because all of the rigging, etc., was, let me see if I have a piece that I'll show you a piece of her. All of her rigging was hemp.
Yeah.
So this was a piece of her forestay, nice cable laid hemp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. Oh, it's good stuff.
Do you know what that looks identical to?
What's that?
I did walking around the Mariners Museum when I think it was at the beginning of I walked around the Mariners Museum before I did the show with Das Possum. And
yes.
In a case there with a model of what's her name? Nelson's at Trafalgar. What's
Victory?
Victory. There's a model of the Victory. There's a whole room right now, a temporary display on Nelson. But there's an identical looking that piece of forestay from the Victory.
Yes, from Battle Trafalgar. Yeah. And they have, I think it's one of her topsails, fore topsail possibly.
I think so. Yeah.
One of the curators who was there for many, many, many years, Peter Goodwin, was a friend of mine. I met him at several conferences while I was working on Balclutha. When I was in Britain and Scotland doing the Glen Lee restoration, I think I mentioned this to you last night. I did a trip down to Cutty Sark to steal some of their crew. I needed crew to do the ship, and I ended up going down to Portsmouth and seeing Peter, and I also stopped by and was able to visit with Harry Spencer and down at Cowes at his rigging loft. But they did an incredible job. So everything was hemp. There was not one shackle in the rig. Everything was seized, lashed. We'd had beautiful rose lashings everywhere. She just exceptionally well done. And if you watch the movie with Mel Gibson, Anthony Hopkins, you'll see the sails were all Scottish flax canvas.
Really?
So they're just beautiful to hand versus Dacron or Terraline or some Oceanic. But if it rained, they absorbed their own weight in water. So the forecourse, which weighed normally about 800 pounds, now you're talking maybe 1,400. So it was. And I remember once we went to the expo up in Vancouver back in '86, I believe it was. We started in Long Beach, went to Vancouver to the expo, and then a shipyard period, and then went back, actually sailed to Ensenada and then to Tahiti to do filming, for about 6 months on a Captain Cook miniseries, which was a lot of fun. But it is absolutely amazing when you think about what those sailors went through. Because as we were sailing to Vancouver, we were going down the straits, San Juan de Fuca, and it was in March, and we had hail and sleet and slush, and the sails actually froze, and because they absorbed the water. And I remember I was on the main course, I'd laid out on the main yard and was furling the main course, and we're having to pound the sail to furl it because it had frozen into the shape.
Nice.
It's aerodynamic shape, and it was just miserable but wonderful, because I remember reading Melville and Conrad and et cetera, and it was just wonderful experiencing for a short period of time, because I could go down on deck, go into the galley, microwave a cup of coffee, and I'm nice and warm. Whereas, when Bligh was rounding the horn, they didn't really have that.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But getting back to my Sydney story, so I was splicing up a piece of wire, and this old timer, I think he was probably in his early 80s. So this was in 86.
Yeah.
So he probably was born right around the turn of the century, 1900, 1902.
Mm-hmm.
So during the time of the grain races in the 20s and whatnot, he was actually sailing on the ships that have been restored. And he was just watching me, and he, after about a day, he came over, because this is back when I was still kind of futzing around with wire splicing. I really perfected the wire splicing with Steve Hyman on board Valklutha when I signed aboard Valklutha, because she was all wire rope. But he showed me a couple of little tricks with the spike that I've incorporated into the way that I turn in a splice, and I talk about it in the book on Riddle of the Strands, on wire rope splicing. And so I feel kind of guilty if I do not pass that along. Otherwise, then it'll die. And the way that I finish a bit of service is a little different, and I learned that on Bounty from one of my dear shipmates, Christopher Giannini, who we call Tarbrush. That's another story. But so I have been the recipient of some wonderful knowledge that accumulated, over hundreds of years. And I don't want it to end with me. I don't want to be the bookend of that knowledge. It needs to continue and go on. And that's why museums are important. And I really appreciated what you and Des and Lindsay was alluding to it. We're talking about that museums, the curatorial staff really need to be aware of not only the object that they are a curator of, but the context. Yeah. And it's one thing to be book learned, but it's another thing to have actually been on board ships and know how they breathe, to explain respiration to the public. I was very fortunate. One of my main mentors was Carl Cordum, the late Carl Cordum, who founded the San Francisco Maritime Museum that later became the National Park. And he was just absolutely incredible and such a stickler for the lexicon of the sailors. I remember once we were on board the C.A. Thayer. I was with Carl and I think Steve Hyman and I think maybe one of the shipwrights, I can't remember right now, but we were looking at something and I happened to mention, because I was kind of new at the park and I wanted to just, say a couple of things. And I mentioned the fact that was such a massive keelson. And Carl turned to me and said, keelson, it's called kelson. And I'm okay, so I never pronounced keelson again. Oops. And the other, which is another one of my pet peeves I've carried along from Carl, and people that have sailed with me appreciate this. You'll never hear me say four-course yard, because there is no such animal. There's a four-course that is bent onto the foreyard. And I have this argument with, when I was director of the Alyssa, some of the crewmembers were going, the four-course yard. And I was going, no, it's the four-course on the foreyard, there's develops a certain frustration in people going, well, what does it really matter as long as everyone agrees what it's called? Well, it does matter. It matters in a gale at 3 o'clock in the morning that you are directing the crew to the proper bit of gear and that there is no confusion, and that was drummed into me through Carl, and he was an incredible curator because he actually sailed on the last American square rigged around Cape Horn, the Kyalani.
The what?
Yeah, so they picked up cargo. She was part of the Alaska Packers fleet that the Valklutha and the Star of India down in San Diego were part of too. And I think Harry Dring was aboard, and one other fellow, I can't remember his name right now. Can't think of it, but they joined the ship.
What was the name of the vessel?
Kyalani.
Okay.
The Kyalani. And if you look at Sea History magazine, their logo is the Kyalani, because she, as I mentioned, Carl and Harry, and I think it was one of the Newhalls who was aboard. picked up the ship in Grace Harbor and sailed her, loaded it with lumber and around Cape Horn, around Cape of Good Hope to Australia. Well, when they were rounding Cape of Good Hope is when Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Oh.
So Kyalani was basically taken over to be used in the war effort. Carl became an officer in, I think they called it the Mosquito Fleet or something like that, that MacArthur had set up a lot of these boats to go to the islands for resupplying our Marines and other soldiers of the Allies, et cetera. And so he had a knowledge of how square riggers work. He had a love of it. So when he's a curator, he has a different, how should I say it? He has a different feel and a whole different philosophy than someone who is perfectly adequately trained and very knowledgeable, but they lack that extra little, how should I say it, expertise that only comes from handling sail going around Cape Horn on a square rigger.
I would imagine that would be
Yeah.
the test. There was something I saw on YouTube. This goes back a while, and I can't remember, but it was some reproduction square rigger that they were showing tacking, and that's not letting go of a couple of sheets and pulling up the other sheets on your yacht in 25 seconds. That's a job requiring tremendous harmonious coordination between a team of crew.
Yes, it's all about leverage. I mean, life is all about leverage when you think about it. And yeah, whether it's like my 20-foot Flicka that I absolutely love, but beautiful little boat, or if you're sailing Balclutha, Star of India, et cetera, a large square rigger, it's all about leverage. It's where the center of effort of the sails, the combined center of effort is. Ideally, you want to use as little helm as possible, because every time you're using your rudder to correct for weather helm or lee helm or whatnot, the rudder steers by creating drag and it slows you down. So having a good sea sense and basically listening to the ship will always tell you what it wants. Okay, slack away the lee brace another foot. Maybe that'll help free her up a bit. Or you don't want the yards, 4 yard on a backstay or something, for too long. But it really is wonderful. And I got in this business in the early 80s, after the bikini thing. And I was very fortunate because there were still men alive and women alive that had sailed or been involved with commercial square riggers carrying cargo. And I just feel so fortunate. And I really enjoy passing that along to younger people. I have a quick story, if I could tell you, about a fellow by the name of John Albright, Captain Albright. Well, Captain Albright was the head of the Long Beach pilots down in Long Beach, California, LA Long Beach Harbor. And so, it's a pretty important job. And when I was sailing on Bounty, she was still owned by Dino De Laurentiis when I first signed aboard. And we were taking her out maybe once every 6 weeks or so to make sure she was ready to put to sea, because we never knew when another film contract would happen. So we had a skeleton crew, maybe about 5 or 6 fellas. And when we would take the ship out, we had a lot of volunteers, local volunteers that wanted to go sailing on the Bounty. So it was very easy getting crew, and we trained them, et cetera. But since she was over 300 tons, we required a pilot anytime we took the vessel out. So the very first time we left, we were down at Pier 19, I think it was, in Long Beach. The pilot was not used to all the windage on a square rigger without bow thrusters. And we banged the dock pretty hard and busted, basically started the starboard side. I think it was the main brace boomkin, it kind of got knocked askew a bit. So that damage had to be repaired. Then the next time we went out, a different pilot was with us. And when he was bringing the vessel alongside, he actually damaged, I think it was about $7,000-8,000, and that's back when money was money, back in the 80s. You know, the quarter badge. You know, on the great cabin aft, there's little like bay windows that are on the hull, and it was built out of you know, timber and some fiberglass, and it got pretty severely damaged. So the pilots decided to, hey, maybe we need to send our chief pilot, our head pilot, who was Captain Albright. Well, Captain Albright came down to the ship. He comes aboard. He looks aloft immediately. You can always tell a sailor because they're looking up. Farmers are looking down. Sailors are always looking up. That's why they trip a lot, and that's why we break our noses and chip our teeth. You know, that kind of people think it's because we're drunk. It's because we're looking aloft all the time. But John came aboard, looked aloft, and he came to me and Tarbrush, Chris Giannini, who was the bosun on board, and said, "I'd like you to make ready to run the foretop staysail." Well, we just looked at each other and went, "Oh my God!" Not only does he call it the right thing, you know, he didn't say like the Genoa or the jib or the Jenny or whatnot or the spinnaker, but he also used the proper terminology, make it ready to run, and we're going, hey, this is great. You know, so we both thought, well, maybe he did a lot of reading on square rig ships, whatnot. So he used that as his bow thruster. We would set and strike, get the bow off, and then he'd back down. So the next time we were out sailing, John became our pilot. And I was sweating a line, or was doing something at the belaying pin. And he said, have you ever tried doing it this way? So and I went, damn, that was really pretty good. But he was very self-effacing. He kept things close to the chest. So, and we didn't want to really query him because, you know, he's captain, he's a pilot, so, but after about the fourth time he took us out, his wife came aboard and said, I'd like to rent the Bounty for John's party. It's his 50th anniversary of first going to sea. You know, he sailed on Mashulu. And we just went, oh, now that explains it. And if you ever get a copy of, let me see where the book is. This is a wonderful book called Windjammer Significant. And it was written by J. Farrell Colton, who was the other American. There were 3 Americans on Mashulu during one of the grain races. I think this was the grain race before Eric Newby, or it might have been after, I'm not quite sure. Mm-hmm. But John did not sail with Eric Newby, but he wrote that real famous book on the last grain race. And if you turn to page, on this book, Windjammer Significant, if you turn to page 105, you look at this picture down here, John Albright at the wheel of Mashulu. No
kidding.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
And I mean, this Mashulu is massive. She's almost 5,000 tons. She's 4 sticks, 4 masts, 212 foot tall.
Yeah.
I remember I had the pleasure of doing restoration, the rig restoration, when she was in Camden, and now she's alongside the waterfront in Philly. And I would be out on the bowsprit doing something, and I would just look aft and see, 48, 49 foot beam, almost 400 foot long sailing ship that was just powerful. And that was a lot of fun. Probably the most dangerous rigging job I've done too.
Really?
But that's another story, just because she was really derelict. She had been a restaurant, turned into a restaurant in Philly, and then there was a fire. They towed her to Camden, to this old deserted coal dock in Camden, and she just sat there for years and years and years. And so a lot of the foot ropes, which hang underneath the yard that you stand on, well, they're supported at either end, by being lashed or shackled onto the yard. And then there were stirrups that kind of hold it so that when you step on the foot rope, you don't, go all the way down. It keeps it kind of a equilibrium. Those stirrups had been lashed to the jack stays on top of the yard. They're rods that both the sail and the stirrups hook up to. In Mashulu's case, she's so big, they had a safety jack stay that the stirrup would lash to, and then a jack stay farther forward that the sail would lash to, because these yards were massive. They were put on the jackstay with baling wire, the kind of wire you would hang a picture in your living room with. So I remember I was going out on the yard. I was on top of the yard crawling. So I was between the two jackstays, and I would grab a stirrup and just go bang, bang, break. Go to the next one, bang, bang, brick. Everything was suspect. And that was a little bit of an interesting, crazy job. But we had a fun time. And if you ever get to Philadelphia, the restaurant is pretty good.
Yeah. So there is still a restaurant on it?
It's still a restaurant, and it's gotten excellent reviews. I was there at one of the All Ship America conferences several years ago, and had I think some lobster bisque that was out of this world, and the bar is fantastic too.
Sounds good.
And
talking about the old sailors from just after the turn of the 20th century, I'd been working this is back in the mid 80s. I was working as a marine electrician at a marina in Urbana, Virginia, and long story that everyone got laid off from there. It's a long story. And so I was like, yeah, what am I going to do? So one of the guys who was a boat surveyor, he said, my parents live just down the road here. They need their house painted. You want to go do that? And I was like, sure. So I went down and started scraping and painting their old plantation house along the water on the Rappahannock River. And his dad had Alzheimer's. He had serious dementia, but he could remember, and he was a German man. He had moved here, and he was born in Germany, spoke German, obviously, as a German man. He sailed on those grain ships.
Yeah.
And he could tell long stories about being before the mast. And I'm telling you, I don't remember the details, but I remember being impressed as a sailor then. And anyway, that really sticks in my head what an interesting guy he was, and that he had, been sailing on square riggers.
Yeah, no, it is just the thing that I enjoy the most about sailing on a square rig ship is as you're laying aloft, you can actually feel the vessel breathing almost. The rigging becomes like the arteries, supplying power and blood to the ship, and the sails are like the muscle, and you can actually feel the ship, the rig kind of working a little bit. Now, if everything is bar tight, you don't necessarily get that feeling. But on most square rig vessels, the rigging is not set up ultra tight like some of like America's Cup boats are, et cetera. With some of the newer materials that we have. But it is wonderful feeling. It's almost like you're communing with the soul of the ship. It is alive. It is an entity, and it's something you need to take care of because it's taking care of you.
Yeah. A few years ago, I took a trip up to Maine just to take pictures of the Portland Head Light, and then made my way back down the next day and spent several hours on the USS Constitution.
Yes.
Which is a fascinating thing. Do you know, obviously there's riggers that work on that. Is that all hemp and traditional rigged stuff?
Glad you asked. No, now originally she would have been, but they have been rigging her with modern synthetics, just for a couple of reasons. Safety and most importantly longevity.
Right.
There's some of the new high modulus ropes that are coming out. I think it's ultra high weight molecular polypropylene or whatever it is, polyethylene. They're just amazing, and they began using that material on the Constitution. I believe the brig Niagara used some in her rig, and right now my current project, kind of with COVID, it's at a little bit of a standstill. Is I'm doing the rig restoration on James Cagney's old personal yacht called the Swift of Ipswich.
Really?
And she is the sweetest little square rigger. I keep looking for the bottle that they took her out of. You know, she's like the perfect size, about, you know,
Yeah.
9 feet, you know, thereabouts. And she is just a joy to behold. And her history is wonderful too, you know, being owned by Cagney.
Yeah.
The story was she was built by Robinson Shipyard back in Ipswich, Mass. I think they used a lot of the shipwrights from the Essex River, you know, so there was a big cadre of qualified shipwrights. This is back in the late 30s.
Mm-hmm.
She was designed by Howard Chappell, who was like the dean of naval architecture in America.
I have
Designed
Chappell's books,
Chappell,
my dad's.
yeah, from original plans of the Swift of Ipswich, which was during the American Revolution. She was captured by the British. The British always take lines off vessels they captured. So the Smithsonian, and I think Howard Chappell at that time was like in charge of their plans department or something. I'm not entirely sure, but he was hired by Robinson, and they drew up the plans for the Swift of Ipswich on spec, because they thought, okay, there are going to be a lot of people because the economy is slowly coming back, and there are going to be people that want to do world voyages, you know, because there were a lot of people going around in the 30s giving talks. You know, Eric Newby did, Alan Villiers did, you know, a lot of people were giving talks. It started, I think, with Joshua Slocum when he gave his talks after his trip. So it is fascinating that she has that pedigree, and she was fastened with trunnels, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful little vessel. If you go online and Google Swift of Ipswich, you'll see her. But the Coast Guard, we were restoring the rig on her because Cagney bought her, and he brought her around to the West Coast. And I believe the story that I've heard, I'm still trying to contact people in the Cagney family, and I've had some success. The Cagney brothers brought the vessel around, and she was one of the first Hollywood sailboats in, down Newport Beach.
Okay.
So later on, I think Spencer Tracy and Errol Flynn, a lot of the Hollywood stars, Humphrey Bogart, started keeping, and that's how Newport Beach became this yachting mecca. And I have a couple of old historic photographs of the Swift with her mast down. They just got her underneath a bridge to get her into this lagoon at Newport Beach, and it is a fascinating tale. But the problem was she was rigged with wire rope. And, wire rope is interesting stuff. This is a piece of the shrouds from the Glenlee in Scotland.
Okay.
It's 6 by 7. It's 1 3/8 in diameter. Breaking strength, 70 tons. I mean, that's a lot of breaking strength. Yeah. Well, on the Swift of Ipswich, her original rig was probably about 1 inch thereabouts, but it would have been hemp. So they replaced it with 1 inch wire, which, I mean, it's overkill, because 1 inch wire off the top of my head, that's going to be 35-ton breaking strength. It's going to be massive, and so the Coast Guard wanted us to reduce weight aloft for stability. So I contacted a couple of old shipmates who I've worked with in the past, and spoke with Brian Toss, the late Brian Toss, who was just an incredible fellow, and my buddy Tom Ward, who was instrumental in helping us get the waiver tree rigged, about this newfangled stuff called VETS 198. Here's a sample of it. Kevlar core.
Go ahead.
Kevlar, 4-strand. This 1 inch piece will break at 30 tons.
Really? And the weight coefficient versus this
nothing.
Steel is
absolutely nothing. We have all the rigging is done on the Swift. We just need to have the spars built. People ask, well, why didn't you build the spars first? Well, because I wasn't there. But to make a long story short, we had the old spars. So I was able to do all my lofting off the old spars and the old rig, et cetera. And, I made sure that I told the administration down there, when you replace these spars, they have to be the same lengths and diameters, because that's what the rig is fitted to.
Yeah.
And one of the things we did was swapped out to this Vets 198, this Kevlar 4-strand that has a dyed polyester jacket on the strand. So that's for UV. And the stuff is just absolutely incredible and lightweight. It floats. So I had the old rig and I was able to weigh, I think it was the starboard gang on the foremast on the lower shrouds. And I forget, I think the weight was like 475 pounds. I weighed the starboard gang on the foremast with this. It was 49 pounds.
Really?
Yeah. So we're going to be able to take almost a ton out of the rig, because the other thing I'm doing is we're not going to have any shackles in the rig. I'm going, basically full 18th century on them. And why not? That's how I was brought up on Bounty. And, I was on the lead rigger on the Lady Washington when she was first built. And, we did everything was rose lashings, square lashings, round lashings, inside cinch, outside cinch, turn your partner and fall de da, it's wonderful, all the handwork, because people ask me, well, how did fancy work? Where's its place in, like square rig and everything else? There's fancy work in a lot of places on square rig. One of the things that we did with the Swift of Ipswich was her foreyard, the lowest yard on the foremast, was held away from the mast by a steel or an iron truss boat that holds the yard away from the mast so it can actually turn without hitting the shrouds too soon, right? And one of the ways that we're reducing weight as well is I went to a rope truss, which is what we had on Lady Washington, on Bounty. It was traditional to use a rope truss. Well, when you're doing that, the yard occasionally, imagine the wind is filling the sail and it's pushing the yard away, away from the mast. So it's able to maneuver and whatnot.
Yeah.
If the wind dies, occasionally the yard can come, it doesn't come, slamming back too abruptly. It can on occasion, especially if you're motoring into a head sea. So to prevent a lot of damage being done to the timber, you would use either a Russian mat, a paunch mat, rot mat, or in the case of the Swift of Ipswich, I made up a bunch of sword mat out of some soft nylon and tarred it, and it looks great. So cool. There's a lot of fancy work. There's grafting on blocks. There's leather work. Et cetera. And besides, people say, sailors are lazy. Well, that's just from not working. A little rigor humor there for you. Here, I'll give you another little bit of rigor humor. Here's a riddle for you. What is the third mast on a brig called?
Third mast on a brig.
On a brig. Third mast on a brig.
Mizzen mast?
Very good. I don't know. It's mizzen.
There you go.
Boy. I forgot to mention I'm appearing all week, right?
That's right. I'll be here all week.
Yeah. But it's interesting. There are a lot of rigging, fancy work is an oral tradition and a passed on skill. So there were a lot of mnemonic devices. For instance, if I would say this little saying, what's aft on starboard, forward on port and inboard all around, it's a Matthew Walker knot.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. Or pardon me, it's what's forward on starboard, aft on port, and inboard all around is the Matthew Walker. So where. Let me grab a dead eye.
All right.
Just so happen to have one right here.
Yeah.
Beautiful lignum dead eye. So
yeah.
notice how there's a round hole here, and then these have a score, right?
Yep.
So, when the line goes through, it enables you to create your purchase.
Yeah.
Well, on the one that has a square hole, that's where your stopper knot goes.
Right. That would make sense.
So, for instance, on the port side, it would be like this. On the starboard side, it would be the other way, with the stopper knot on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of pneumatic devices that sailors use. Worm and parcel with fillet, turn about and serve away.
Okay.
That's another saying. And, there's an interesting thing about that. I just so happen to have my sign up here.
Let me see that. There you go. All right.
There you go.
Yeah.
So a lot of people view it as worm and parcel with fillet, turn and serve away. But what happens is, I don't know, can you see these two posts I have here?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep.
If, let me just, I've been stropping blocks earlier, so let's just say, that I wanted to, put service on this line right here. Okay. If I'm serving rigging that goes around a mast, like a lower shroud, so here's the mast around my arm and it goes down to deck. You have the two legs.
Okay.
Right? So if I'm serving against the leg, I'm going to be going this direction, right?
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to be going like that against the leg. I'm going to worm it and parcel it against the leg. And I'm going to stop up here. So I'll start here, stop up here.
Okay.
All right. If I put the parceling on the exact same way, what will happen is as the service is being clapped on, laid on, it will bubble the parceling a little bit. Now, if it's only 12 feet, 6 feet, it's not too big. But if you're serving a long length, like on Mashulu, her backstays were 200 feet long.
Sheesh.
Okay, now you have to double that, right? So we had a piece of wire that was almost 400 feet long just for the backstays.
Sheesh.
All right. So actually, that would have been to the top of the mast, probably about 185 feet. So let's call it, you're talking with a long piece of wire rope. And as you're serving, if you get past 100 feet or so, you have the chance of forming a bubble because the parceling is kind of slightly unlaying itself. If the parceling is put on the opposite way, as the service is going on, it's tending to tighten the parceling, just like when you roll up a newspaper.
Yeah.
You can make it tight or you can make it loose. You can make it loose. It's the exact same principle. But these are all things that if you just read a book or you take it at face value without really having someone explain to you the intricacies, then you have an issue. For instance, on that same piece of rope, I always start parceling at top dead center or finish parceling at top dead center, so that because the parceling is acting like shingles on a roof, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to start at deck and I'm going to parcel aloft to my top dead center. Then I'm going to start on the other leg and do the same thing. So that it forms a shingle. If water gets under the service, it'll run off.
Yeah.
If I start up here and go down, I'm going to have the shingles going the opposite way. If I start here going correct, it's perfect for this leg. But as I come down that side, if I'm serving it horizontal, all of a sudden now the parceling's upside down. So there are a lot of little subtle intricacies that go into this, that a lot of people don't think about because, you're just trying to get the job done.
Yeah.
But that's also one of the fun.
That makes me think of, we were talking last night and I told you I worked for a long time in the billiards industry, and you'd go out and recover a pool table and every customer would watch you do it. I mean, 99% of the customers would watch you do it. They'd never seen that done before. And so every now and again, um, a couple of years later, customer calls up and says, "Yeah, I just want to buy some cloth. I'm going to go ahead and do this myself. I watched the guy do it last time." And they'd get home with their cloth and start covering the pool table, and then they'd call us and say, "How do you do the ends on the rails?" And if I was on the phone, I'd say, "Sir, if I could explain this to you over the phone, we would not be in business." It's, I mean, there are, I mean, yeah, you know how or you don't, and you learn it by a lot of the intricacies by doing it.
Yes, exactly. And that's where I've been fortunate because, starting with the Bounty, I just had some incredible folks that I sailed with. As I mentioned, Chris Giannini Tarbrush, and Erwin Van Asbeck, and Peter Kane, and just this whole list of people that passed along their skills to me.
Mhm.
And then I kind of did my own little take and gathered information from other people. And so now I've got this little like rigging library that I want to, make available to a lot of, especially younger folks coming up. God, I never thought I'd be saying younger folks, but I guess since I just started Medicare, I guess there are a lot of younger folks. But that's one of the things that I enjoy doing. I've been mentoring a fellow that has helped me out quite a bit on getting the rigging done on the Swift of Ipswich, Captain John Kraus, who is an incredible shanty singer. If you go on YouTube and type in John Kraus, Kraus, and the Goers, they have the most incredible shanty band, and they feature a tuba. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Well,
there's one song, Billy Bones, that was written by the late and wonderful Skip Henderson. They do an incredible version of Billy Bones. But I've been mentoring him. The Spirit of Dana Point was originally built by Dennis Holland as, I think, the Pilgrim of Newport. And Dennis sailed her for many years and then sold her and went to other owners. Now she was taken over by the Ocean Institute down in Dana Point, and they needed to re-rig the vessel, put a new deck on her. Being an older wooden ship, these things happen. And they asked me if I would do it, and I said, well, yes, but I would, want to kind of be an employee because I didn't want to start up my rigging business again with insurance and all that just for one job. And they decided that no, they wanted to have someone contracted. Well, John decided to take the job on, and so he'll send me a picture with his iPhone going, "Hey, so what's happening here? Or how should this go?" And it's wonderful because he is very talented, along with several of the other folks that helped out on the Swift of Ipswich, who are just wonderful folks. And it's nice to be able to mentor someone because I had that opportunity. And I have nowhere near the experience of the fellows that mentored me, but hopefully it'll be more than if they had, got a Mad magazine on rigging, rig the Valclutha. At least
rigging for dummies.
Yeah, but that's dummies with 3 M's, let me tell you.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And I know you're familiar with the Jamestown ships.
Yes.
Here near, 5 miles from me. I went down there and I talked to one of the crew members and so forth. And of course, I'm still working, and until end of March, I'm out of there, and I'll be doing this full time. And I don't know how that all plays out, but I have considered, even at my age, volunteering on that. There are 3 ships down there.
They're great.
They do everything as it was done, with probably trentals and I don't know that the rigging is probably synthetic, but
it's done.
But it's done according to tradition. Yes.
Very good. Yeah, Eric Speth is, I think, in charge of those vessels.
Yeah, that's right. And I've got his email. I need to get in touch with him. But
he is great. When you do give him my best, he was part of the original rigging crew on Alyssa, and that's,
yeah.
I met and Eric over the years, and just a wonderful, talented fellow who deserves. And where you are, it's wonderful because up in Delaware you have the incredible Calmer Nichols. She is exceptionally
I have
well
seen her
run.
at sea at Opsail 2000, and
Yeah,
then she
she's
came down here
beautiful.
to Yorktown a couple of years ago. She was sitting at the at the pier at Riverwalk in Yorktown.
Yeah, no, she's
Down
wonderful.
people like
They
her.
have the Maryland Dove. There are just a whole host of wonderful replicas that you
Yeah.
can really get an idea as to how it was done, and see, most importantly, see the evolution of square rig. A lot of people don't realize that on the Golden Hind, I had the wonderful opportunity of sailing as chief mate on Golden Hind for a little while back after I'd sailed on Bounty. And there are no foot ropes back in Golden Hind's day.
Really?
Yeah.
How'd they get up there?
Well, if you take, you would climb up the ratlins and the shrouds, and the tops, the platform that is at where the topmast and the lower mast join at the hounds there, is like this big basket. It's really wide and big. So you would be inside there, and when the topsail yard was lowered, if you look at the way sails were cut during the Elizabethan era, the heads were very narrow, so that when the sail was lowered, you could reach out without getting on the yard and grab the sail and furl it.
Really?
The lower yard, foreyard and main yard, were on big jeer tackles, big jeer blocks, and they would lower it right down on top of the bulwark and furl the sail there and then send it back up. So it really is amazing when you look at the evolution. Also, the way the masts were, if you take a look at masts in the Elizabethan era, the mizzen was raked aft, the main might be more plumb, and then the foremast is raked forward. The bowsprit, the steve, it's not called rake, it's called steve. The steve of the bowsprit was really tall. Well, as ships progressed, the mast started going aft a little bit more, the bowsprit started coming down. The bows became more hollow in the mid 19th century with the famous Aberdeen bow. It's wonderful when you look at the evolution of rigging. Now, this was over hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Not quite like when you look at the evolution of the Wright brothers to a 747, which is in one lifetime.
Yeah.
It's staggering. Or the moon shot, the moon landing. I mean, I remember my grandmother, when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, she just didn't talk to anyone for like 2 days. She was born in 1886.
Wow.
And it was almost like it was too much for her. She remembered when cars came out, and now men are walking on the moon, and it just really unsettled her.
Yeah. My grandmother and grandfather were both living during that time too. And 1895 was when he was born. I think 1898 was when she was born. So yeah.
So imagine what they went through. Henry Ford was probably still selling ice cream, at that time when they were born.
Yeah.
The Wright brothers were building bicycles.
They were making bicycles.
It really is amazing, and a lot of this was driven by the merchant service. So the vessels that we work on, or if you go to some of the texts, etc., it was the merchant service, because the Navy is there to defend. So you want to use established protocols. You don't want to necessarily go out onto the next new thing. Yeah. But the merchant service it's all about making money. How do we save money? How do we do this? So they were a lot more efficient. Split topsails arrived in the merchant service well before they were on naval vessels. Also, you had 300 men, so it's real easy to rig a topsail with a couple of hundred fellows versus having a crew of 26, per se. But it really is interesting, and you have a wonderful opportunity, and I would definitely go out and say hello to Eric. He's a fantastic fellow.
There was an article on him in the local magazine, the We're Not Next Door Neighbors, maybe a year or so ago. And I remember I was going to try. I couldn't find it. I think I may have stashed that away where it's in a nice, safe place that I can't find it. That's how that works.
The best places.
Of course. It'll find it someday when I'm dead. My children will find it and throw it away. Um, so fancy work, right? You've done
Yeah.
quite a bit of fancy work. I see some of it behind you. There's and I
Well,
where
this was my first chest,
yeah.
first chest Beckett's.
Cool.
Um,
I
let's
see
see.
some couple of ditty bags.
Oh yeah. This one here is kind of my presentation ditty bag.
Yeah.
This is made from a piece of Bounty's Scottish flax sailcloth.
Cool.
The handle is made from a piece of shroud laid hemp that was used in her mizzen rigging. There are always little odds and ends. The wonderful thing sailing on Bounty was we had to freshen the nip on the rigging quite often. By that I mean it naturally stretched.
Right.
So when we got to the point where the dead eyes were not that far apart, we had to cut the seizings, do a new turn back on the dead eye, and that's how you end up, cutting off lengths that you get to keep.
Yeah.
So the same thing on the mizzen. So I kept a section of the mizzen shroud and did the fancy work. So there's some leather coach whipping, there's some grafting, Turk's heads, Matthew Walker knots, etc. And I put the date and the excuse me, the longitude when I crossed the equator.
Is that stitched in?
No, I painted it in with India ink.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, July 18th, 1986, 133 degrees, 37 minutes west is when we crossed the equator. And I put a leather bottom on it. With roped it with a piece of Rander's hemp, which is real nice.
Cool.
So that's a fun one. It did, the hand laid kringles and all the lace with. I'll never do this again. There's two different styles of Turk's heads on here, and quite versus my utilitarian bag, which is this one here. This is the one I'll take on rigging jobs, and once again, it has the leather bottom and whatnot, so it doesn't harm the deck. Let's see what else. Oh, we have, this one that I did in commemoration of the waiver tree.
Yeah, I was wondering. So you've held on to that.
Yes.
You did that for yourself, saying, "Here it is."
Well, what we were talking about yesterday, we have the unique opportunity with these vessels to create some kind of a legacy for ourselves and the people that helped us. And I don't have children, I have, ships. So for instance, I consider the Glen Lee my Scottish daughter. Mashulu is, my Philadelphia Freedom daughter, right? Now Waiver Tree is a New York daughter, Putting all these kids through college is going to be hell. Figure it out. So it's wonderful you have that legacy, and I wanted to create that frame that in my will it's going to be going to South Street Seaport when I finally how should we say cross the bar. But it's nice, and one of the things that I like to do is, we were talking last night, is on the back of all the fancy work I do, I'll put something like who did it and what dates, etc. So that
somewhere here, I think this was a trial and error on it all smeared when I first coated it. This is the first try. Can you read that normal, or does it look backwards like it does to me?
No, I can read it.
Okay, good. That's the second version of this is on the back of the Pentagon frame, but on all of them, I have signed them, with name, date, wonderful. And sometimes now that I have these, one of those goes on each as well.
See, excellent.
I have stickers, and then in that I'm getting ready to start doing some festivals and shows, I now have hang tags that go on everything that I make.
Excellent.
hanging from
Well, that,
a piece of
you know,
twine.
we could talk about something that we spoke about last night, you know, the hang tag.
Yeah, yeah.
This is once again the lexicon. One of the things that really just drives me crazy. I'm noticing in a lot of videos and publications that people are no longer using the proper term, probably because they're ignorant. They just haven't been exposed or they don't know. So I was watching a video on, I forget what it was, but the fellow said, and then you luggage tag the cords together. And I'm thinking to myself, luggage tag? What the heck? So I went, oh, you mean like a lark's head or a cow hitch, you know? And
Oh my God.
and
You know,
so when you think about
I've
that,
always called that a lark's head. I almost take offense at cow's hitch, but cow's hitch is
Yeah.
right too. I mean, it's whatever it is. But
well, yeah,
it's
but
those two
lark-
things.
Yeah, lark's head
Luggage
is,
tag?
yeah, lark's head.
No, I'm
is
not
what-
familiar with luggage tag.
Listen, you'll hear that, you know, and you know, just saying, you know, loop instead of bite. It's just going on and on and on. You know,
Yeah.
there's you know, bitter end, working end, standing part, and they're not really using the now the end result is still the same, but there's some magic being lost when we start losing the sailor lexicon that developed over hundreds and hundreds of years into a technical specific language.
Yeah.
Well,
and once again, so that everybody's on the same page. But I mean, they're making words up now. I mean,
oh, they are. You know, one of the things that drove me crazy. Yeah, I used to not have this blonde hair, but when I was director on the Alyssa, one of the crew members would go, well, you know, we need to tighten up the upper hamper. I was thinking to myself, upper hamper, I know what luggage, I know what clothes hamper is. I know what, you know, to hamper an investigation.
Yeah.
But what the heck is upper hamper? And then I realized they meant top hamper, you know, so there's a particular point. And that I think kind of happened in the period of time between when Kurt Voss was director and I became director. You know, there was a couple of years there where, I mean, people mean well and they're, you know, they need to call things something. And if you don't know what it is, then by common agreement, you kind of come up with it. But if you go to another vessel and say, you know, hey, your upper hamper's loose, you know, I would look at you going, well, no, what do you mean upper hamper? You mean top hamper? Yeah. So,
yeah.
But, you know, at the end of the day, as long as everyone's safe and whatnot, I guess that's the main thing. But the language at 3 a.m, you know, another thing that's one of my sticklers, you know, I used to captain of a couple of ships. I had the joy of being Lady Washington's third captain after the illustrious and incredible Jack Finney.
So that's about it, folks, for this section, because I'm breaking this into two fairly equally divided part 1, part 2 on the We're Not Talking. Just very long conversation. Fun, but a very long conversation. So I hope you enjoyed that. More content coming soon. We'll see you then.